Beta is over and it's time to give our feedback in, I hope, civilized and truthful manner. Support Warrior was long-awaited addition to the game and it's time to finally put its beta performance to the rest, once and for all. Let's start with PvE. Warrior's biggest pain point for both Heal Bladeswron and Heal Berserker is that neither of these specs have tools specifically catered to fulfilling a role of support. Yes, Rampart Splitter heals and Lush Forest foreshortens cooldowns of utility skills, but that's not even comparable to, for example, what Herald or Tempest brings to the table in the spec-specific toolkits. Currently, both specs have a grand total of 1 trait specifically made for support purposes, and that holds them back in comparison to other supports. Berserker's healing falls off a cliff when out of rage, and Bladeswron can't upkeep swiftness or vigor on his group without parting ways with staff. That first issue is a problem in regards to how difficult it is to gain adrenaline for support warrior from the get-go. You need to ban both rage skills, weapon swap, double tap mace 2 for adrenaline and still hit the boss a couple of times to generate enough adrenaline to rage. And in this case, both of your skills meant to upkeep your rage are on cooldown, which sets you back in comparison to the average DPS enjoyer, because casting your burst prolongs rage, rage skills prolong rage, and Blood Reckoning is both a rage skill and resets cooldown of your burst, so you can burst twice, which prolongs your rage even further. Putting that resource on cooldown before you even get into rage leaves you with smaller margin for error in your rotation, and you being the healer are meant to be walking safety net for your teammates, aka not just yours but your teammates' mistakes demand your attention. For example, because you can't cast while manually reviving, you can't prolong your rage with bursts or rage skills, which means that every second you stay reviving you get closer to falling out of rage. Henceforth, you are punished for reviving people, and that's not what a healer is supposed to be punished for, as preventing people's death is your bloody job. Bladeswron is far less dysfunctional, as he has far more wiggle room thanks to Lush Forest and not being bound to rage. Bladeswron can use multiple shouts, as he needs only 1 mana to fully upkeep Resolution, and can be far more liberal with his elite, as between a third and half of its cooldown is going to be alleviated by Lush Forest. On the other hand, he is forced to choose between Staff and Warhorn, which impacts negatively his boon upkeep, as there is no shared swiftness and vigor otherwise available to be spammed. The fact that Gunsaber's entire utility boils down to 1 crowd control skill and interaction with Lush Forest is also underwhelming. TLDR, Berserker is punished with significant loss of healing output for helping his teammates up because he can't upkeep rage while doing so, and Bladeswron is punished for having Gunsaber in the first place. Neither one is an issue that would completely kill the spec, but it's like a log lying across your kitchen floor you're trying not to trip over while making dinner. It is annoying but not a problem for the most part until that one time you trip and French kiss the floor. Still, it can be worked around, but it would be so much better if there wasn't any log in your kitchen. Unless you identify as a beaver, in which case you have bigger problems than a log in your kitchen. Anyhow, to alleviate issues with Warrior's support specs, I'd suggest following changes. First, if you are out of combat, make Adrenaline start to go down 3 seconds after being originally applied and not instantly. That would make it so you don't lose your resource if you happen to precast something before game registered that you entered the boss arena. Secondly, Line Breaker needs a better targeting, as it is currently very unforgiving. If you attempt dash cutting like you do with Rush or Bull's Charge, a trick sometimes used to avoid colliding with AoEs, Line Breaker will often fail to register colliding with a teammate. Furthermore, as a skill, it is far too slow to function as a proper ally-targeted movement ability. I recommend using dash speed and animation keyframes from Bull's Charge instead of those of Rush. Finally, the skill should grant protection regardless whether hitting friend or foe. Protection upkeep alone shouldn't require constant switching between boss and the ally. Such mechanics should fall under emergency category and not routine. Finally, when casted on ally, Line Breaker should grant stability, at least to you and the target. If you try to rescue someone in pulsing CC field, now both of you are dead. Congratulations. Next, take Mending Might, shoot it in the back alley, and replace it with reinforcing presence that would heal recipient of any boon you apply to them and grant you adrenaline when you apply a boon to an ally, with internal cooldown of course, 1 second per target. Not only would that increase warriors' sustained healing to entire team just a little bit for a small cost of self-preservation, but would reduce the issues you face with your adrenaline economy, without straight removing that part of the gameplay. You'd for example be able to get into rage on Berserker with just 1 cast of Outrage and applying your boons, leaving your Blood Reckoning to be used when you benefit from it the most. Also, this change wouldn't be a huge buff to warrior in versus modes, as for one, it technically reduces potential self-healing by some laughably small amount, but also having adrenaline per ally affected excludes side noders from benefiting too much. Further, considering spec-specific changes, for Bladeswron I'd make Reverse Flow increase outgoing healing and grant Vigor, and I'd put Swiftness next to Alacrity on Daring Dragon, so that Bladeswron has access to the boons he can't get from Warhorn anymore. That's the best we can do without soft reworking the damned spec. In Berserker's case, make Immortal Champion a support option by moving the Exit Rage manually function to baseline and adding following functionality in its place. If you have downed ally targeted as you enter Rage, pull that ally towards you. Heal and partially revive downed allies in area around you when you enter Rage. Reviving on a successful rally grants adrenaline and restores 2 seconds of Berserk's cooldown. Putting one-man only version of Necromancer's Transfusion on entering Rage with addition to heal and revive is in my opinion the most interesting way one can alleviate the issue of support warrior falling out of Rage for helping allies up. Spending that Rage instead to get ally up quicker and to get a partial refund of sacrificed adrenaline and cooldown is not only going to reduce the problem with Rage upkeep from support's perspective, but will also raise the skill ceiling of a spec, as technically you will be able to pull allies out of bad situations fairly often. This change is also conceptualized to reduce impact on PvP scene as much as possible. Requiring Rage to perform a special revive is already more troublesome to get out of the blue than popping a signet or a glyph, and if the healed amount is made to have low base value with sharp heal power scaling, it may not impact damage builds at all. Speaking of PvP, there are few things I'd like to point out, and for the starters, bugs. Mainly one related to Bullet Catcher I saw a couple of times. That makes channeled block stop prematurely for no visible reason, and targeting on Linebreaker being extremely likely to bug out on allied targets. First is simple to fix, just make the bloody block not end without input from the player. Second is more elusive issue. You see, Linebreaker inherits the movement of Rush, which is the solid contender for slowest dash in the entire game, and that means it has big trouble course correcting when cast at moving target. Ironically, because swing animation at the end of the dash homes at the target, it's significantly easier to hit an enemy with it than to hit a friend. Furthermore, if targeted ally is for example a thief, a guardian, a ranger, a mesmer, a revenant or elementalist or an engineer, there is at least one movement ability at their disposal that will outpace Linebreaker if both of you dash in the same direction or allows them to move in a way Linebreaker cannot, causing it to break. For example, if my teammate Guardian ports with Sword 2 through the fucking wall because he's for some reason allowed to do that right after I press Linebreaker on him, he won't get none of the benefits from the skill, and I'm going to get Willy-E coyoted into the aforementioned wall. Similarly, Linebreaker fails if you press the button and your target shadow steps 1200 units away in one frame of animation. I understand why the skill would fail in either of these cases on an enemy target, but ally-targeted Linebreaker has all the excuses to bend the rules of the game a little bit. Linebreaker should put you next to an ally targeted no matter what.
The missile knows where it is.
So, faster dash speed baseline, and specifically for ally targeted version, give it more range, up to 1500, make it capable of scaling elevation, and make it follow all dashes/shadow steps your ally makes while you are flying towards them.
To drive the missile from a position where it is to a position where it isn't.
And that combined with previously suggested protection and stability changes will grant you a skill that is working as it should in functionality department. Last thing I want to mention is Banner of Defense. In short, it was made obsolete by Staff's Autochain and Best. I suggest changing its initial effect from AoE Aegis and Barrier to a Projectile Denial Dome, so that Warrior isn't as far behind other classes in Projectile Denial department. It would be good enough, especially with Projectile Block already there. This way Warrior could supply Projectile Denial in situations of heavy ranged pressure, where you'd normally want a Firebrand or Herald with their big juicy domes, and where Support Warrior is, for now, completely empty-handed. That is all I had to say in regards to Beta Support Warrior. Crabface out.